Welcome to part 3 of our Getting Started with RAW tutorial, and what we're going to do in this particular video is give this shot a full makeover using a variety of tools and tricks in the Camera Raw editor. So you'll find this file on the disk. It's file number 28, and if you open that up it will automatically open in the Camera Raw editor. And this is a DNG file. It's a digital negative. That's yet another type of RAW format. But all of these RAW files, whether they're Canon or Nikon or Adobe's own DNG, they will all open up quite happily and automatically in the RAW editor. And once you've done that, you'll see the shot in this interface here, and you can then start to work on problems like exposure, for example. We can see from the histogram that the highlights are actually petering out at the right here. They could stretch all the way to the far right to be nice and bright, but they're actually quite weak. And that's a typical histogram for an underexposed photo. So to boost the highlights, we can drag this slider, the exposure slider, to the right, and you can see that the histogram's sliding there to the right. We've got brighter highlights now, and the shot looks much more correctly exposed than it did before. There's the before, very underexposed. There's the after, and we're seeing a much wider range of shadows, midtones and highlights, and we have a healthier looking histogram as a result. Now, to get a correctly exposed shot, what you want is strong shadows and strong midtone detail and strong highlights as well. And we can see the shadows are actually fizzling out. They do go to the far left, so we do have some shadows, but they're not very strong. So to get a nice contrast with blacker blacks, we can drag this slider to the right, and that peaks the shadows a little bit more. So the darker shadows have now got even more strength, and we now have a stronger range of tones, or a wider contrast. You could try adjusting contrast as well to do that by dragging this slider to the right, and again you can see there it's now creating stronger shadows and stronger highlights to create a wider range of shadows, midtones and highlights. Let me just see the before. You can see it's quite a flat contrast there now. There's the after, a much brighter, wider and healthier contrast. Now you've got a few other sliders here that we don't really need, but I'll show you what they do anyway. Recovery helps to restore detail in blown out highlights. So if the clouds have been too overexposed by our adjustment here, you can drag recovery to the right, and that brings back any missing highlight detail. And you can see that it's actually slid the highlights to the left again to make them less strong. But in this case we don't really need to recover any detail because there's no blown out highlight detail, but it's a very useful tool to have. Fill light just helps fill in any midtone details that might be hidden. If we drag that to the right, you can see the midtones are sliding right, but the shadows and the highlights aren't being adjusted. In this case, we could probably do with a slight midtone adjustment, maybe of around about 8, just to fill in some of the midtones there. But we're still preserving our blackest blacks as well, so it's still got a nice range of shadows, midtones and highlights. So these are quite useful tone sliders, and you can make a huge difference, as you can see here. So once you've tweaked tones, it's time to turn your attention to colour. And again, we looked at colour temperature in the previous movie, and this shot here could benefit from a slightly cooler tint just to kind of bring out the cool blue colours in our seascape. So I can just cool things down a wee bit by dragging temperature down to the left like so. And we can create more vibrant looking blues and cyans by dragging vibrancy up to the right, and that will help bring out our weaker colours without over-saturating our stronger colours, especially when you're going to print out blues. There's a danger that what you see on the screen won't print out in the same way on your printer, but vibrancy helps you avoid creating unprintable colours like blues. So that's a great way of now bringing out more detail and cooling the shot down a little bit in a creative way to create a nice seascape. So once you've improved colour and tone, you can then think about sharpening up the shot to bring out lots of subtle details in the textures of the image. And to do that, we can go to this tab here, which is the Detail tab, and we need to see the shot at 100%. So let's grab the Zoom tool, and we can then click here to see the image at 100%. That gives you an accurate look at any sharpening changes we make. Now, by default, Photoshop automatically sharpens up your RAW file by 25 using a radius of 1. And that is a good enough sharpening setting for most healthy shots to create more detail. Let me just take that away by dragging it to the left. And you can see now this is much blurrier and softer, so the unprocessed RAW file is actually lacking detail. But if we type in 25 again, you'll notice that that is bringing out some of the delicate details of our texture here. And if you go too far with your sharpening, I'll just go and set crazy settings like this. You can see we've now got a posterized, blown out highlights here. It looks more like a painting than a photograph. So it's very important that you don't over sharpen your shots, and most of the time the default settings of 25 and 1 should be enough to keep your shot looking nice and sharp without adding nasty artifacts like the ones I've just shown you. Detail and masking help you fine-tune your sharpening in very subtle ways. Detail allows you to reveal more detail as you drag this slider to the right, and masking allows you to apply the whole of the sharpening changes to the entire shot if you leave it on 0, but if you just want to apply it to high contrast edges, then you can drag it more towards the 100 end of the slider, and that will then limit the amount of sharpening that's going on in the photograph to these high contrast edges, but most of the time you will really set that to 0. And down here we have noise reduction, which is very handy if you're shooting on a fast ISO speed of something like 1600. At the moment we're on ISO of 100, so if I just press the spacebar to grab the hand tool and have a look at the sky, it doesn't have too much picture noise in it. But if it did, we can drag the color noise slider to the right, and that gets rid of nasty grains of color. We don't have that problem in this particular shot. And luminance is just general picture noise, and again, to remove that, we can drag that to the right. But it's not really worth doing that too much on a shot that's healthy, because there's a danger that we might actually make it look a little bit blurred. So in this case, let's take luminance back down to 0, and we can reduce color noise as well to around about 20 or so, just to take away any noisy bits of color grain. So let's go back to the zoom tool and right click, and you can go to fit in view to see your edited shot, which is sharper, it's got healthier colors and a wider range of tones, and we can even improve composition. Let's imagine we wanted to actually zoom in on these structures here, and we can do that by grabbing the crop tool, choose normal, and then click and drag, and you can choose exactly the shape that you want. If you hold the shift key down, it constrains it to a square shape, which is quite nice. Something like this will help us zoom in and focus on these main posts in the middle here. You can drag inside to adjust it, and you can see there's a grey area around the edge, and that's because we can't remove permanently any of our original raw file, but we can create a version that looks like this cropped shot here. And to do that, click Open Image, and it'll open up in the standard Photoshop editor, and you can see here that we now have our cropped image with improved colors and tones. And we can save this as something different, like if we go in here, File Save As, we can save it as a Photoshop document and just click Save. And there we have our new version of our raw file. But we can also open up the raw file, and it will still remember the crop, the color settings, the noise reduction settings, and we can carry on tweaking that until we're happy that it's perfect. In the next movie, I'll show you how to set up the Adobe Camera Raw editor so that it suits the needs of your specific camera.